we're going to discuss today one of the greatest Rabbanim in the previous generations, but not too much is known about him, to the masses, that is, to the people who learn about the writings of Chachmei Morocco. They're more aware, but this Chacham was very revered by all of the Chachamim of that generation. His name was Rebbi Eliezer di Avila. He was born in Saleh in the year 1714, and he was a nephew of the Or HaChaim HaKadosh. He was a nephew of the Or HaChaim HaKadosh. That is, his father was Rabbi Shemuel di Avila, who wrote the Sefer Ozen Shemuel, and there Rabbi Shemuel di Avila mentions about his son as well, Rabbi Eliezer di Avila, and it's worthy to speak about him. In general, let's start with the grandfather of the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, who is the great-grandfather of Rabbi Eliezer di Avila, who it seems to be he did learn a little bit of Torah from him, according to Rabbi Shemuel di Avila. And the grandfather of the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, it's interesting to note that last week I was in Morocco, and I was searching for the kever of the Reb Chaim ben Attar HaZaken, the grandfather of the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, who was considered his the Moro HaMuvhak, that means the principal Rav of the Or HaChaim HaKadosh. Not too many people know about him, and they don't know where he's buried at all. I got the phone number of a couple of people who lived in Rabat and Saleh. They didn't know of any kever of Rabbi Chaim ben Attar HaZaken. Finally, I reached Rav Shlomo Dayan from Eretz Yisrael, and Rav Shlomo Dayan told me that the kever of Rabbi Chaim ben Attar HaZaken is not known. That means in those days it could be they weren't marking kvarim, and it's somewhere in the Bet HaKvarot of Saleh. So when we were in the Bet HaKvarot of Saleh, next to Rabbi Rafael Bibas, who was the grandfather of Rabbi Rafael Ankawa, in that area where there was older kvarim, so he said a special hashkava. It seems to be that's where he was buried. Either way, in the Hagdama of the Sefer Ozen Shemuel of Rabbi Shemuel di Avila, who was the brother-in-law of the Or HaChaim and the father of Rabbi Eliezer di Avila, he writes that the Or HaChaim HaKadosh studied, that the Reb Chaim ben Attar HaZaken studied by two great Rabbanim, Rav Chiyad Dayan and Rav Elisha Ashkenazi, who were both Shluchei de Rabbanan, who were both messengers, Shlichim from Eretz Yisrael. And the Shlichim in those times used to come and support the communities in Eretz Yisrael. They used to come fundraise to Morocco. And they also used to teach Torah to the masses in Morocco. I mean, one of the famous Shluchei de Rabbanan was Rabbi Amram ben Diwan, I believe Rabbi David ben Moshe as well. Rabbi David Moshe as well. These were famous Shluchei de Rabbanan. So also over here, Rav Chiyad Dayan and Rabbi Elisha Ashkenazi taught Reb Chaim ben Attar HaZaken, and he in turn was a teacher to the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, to Rabbi Shmuel di Avila, and to his great-grandson, Rabbi Eliezer di Avila. Now, Rabbi Eliezer di Avila, it seems to be, was a special neshama that there's a story written about him that is, I don't know where to verify the story, but that's written in the Hagdamot of the Sfarim. I have two Sfarim over here, one of them called Magen Giborim on Masechet Kiddushin, that was printed from my dear friend Rav Avram Moyal, who lives in New York, and he's a descendant of Rabbi Eliezer di Avila, so he printed Magen Giborim. So there's an introduction, and there's also on Rabbi Eliezer di Avila, and there's also a sefer called Chesed ve'emet by Rabbi Meir Atiyah, the author of the Sidur Avotenu, who lives in Eretz Yisrael, and he also has a Hagdama to the drashot of Rabbi Eliezer di Avila. So that's most of the information is coming from there. There is information written about the Rabbi Eliezer di Avila. The Chida wrote a Haskama. The Rav Chaim Toledano wrote a Haskama. We can learn a lot from these Haskamot. There was also the Shem HaGedolim of the Chida writes a little bit in his biographies of different Chachamim. He writes a little bit about Rabbi Eliezer di Avila. And we see different Chachamim, how they quote him. So in one of the traditions, it's written that Rabbi Eliezer the Rabbi Shmuel Diabila was once at home when there was a knock on his door, and there was an older man that they didn't know where he came from, and he said that a special neshama is going to come from Shamayim, and that's going to be the neshama of Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanos. Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanos was one of the great Tanaim that really was a student of Bet Shammai, of the house of Shammai, and the halacha is like him in Olam Haba. I mean, it was very, very sharp, very mepupal, like it says in the Mishnah. Even if you put all of the Chachamim on one side, the Rabbi Eliezer Horkanos on another, he tips the scale. There's the famous story about the Tanuro Shel Achnai, that the halacha was not like Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanos, and he made all types of miracles to show that in Shamayim they agreed to him, up until a point that they were not able to decide halacha like him. So Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanos was known as a giant, not even from this world, and that was the neshama that they said would be given to Rabbi Eliezer Diabila, and that's why they asked to call him also Eliezer on the name Eliezer ben Horkanos. So the father thought he would have to invest a lot of energies in being able to make sure that he grows into a great Talmid Chacham, but that wasn't necessary because Rabbi Eliezer ben Diabila on his own took initiative to learn and to run to the Bet Midrash, and he would be hanging around with all the great elders of the generation, whereas his friends were playing in the yard. As a matter of fact, there's a story that the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, his uncle, once came to in his trips. Sometimes he lived in Meknes, in Saleh, it depended on the era. So he came to visit the Avila family, and he looked through the door hole, and he saw Rabbi Eliezer Avila was throwing chairs and throwing tables and playing like a little kid. So it was like not typical of him, even though he was a child and that was appropriate for his age, but it wasn't appropriate for him that was usually hanging around with the Gedolim. So he asked him, like, well, why are you doing this? So Rabbi Eliezer said, listen, my Yetzer Hara always attacks me and say, why are you hanging around and learning with the great Gedolim? You should really be sitting and you should really be sitting playing with your friends and throwing chairs like they do, and then just playing around and horsing around. So he said, if that's what the Yetzer Hara wants, he says, I'm going to give in to the Yetzer Hara one time just to play a little bit. In other words, to make him happy. That way I can get back to my learning. So he says, that's what I was doing. I was just like throwing around some chairs to make sure the Yetzer Hara is happy so I can get back to my learning. So either way, there's another version of the story that of Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanos, Rabbi Eliezer Diabila, that he was once learning with a chabura of people, and he was very sharp. Everyone says that about him. He was extremely sharp and extremely direct and strong in learning, and he would brush away any of the questions that came to him, to a point that sometimes it came to a point that he was so strong, the father said, maybe you should tone down a little bit. So apparently in a dream came to him, came to the father in a dream, Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanos said that this is a nitzutz neshama, this is a spark of my neshama, and leave him be. So that's another story attributing Rabbi Eliezer Diabila to Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanos. So either way, he grew to levels that it seems to be from the Haskamot were above and beyond anybody in his generation. The Chida writes in his Haskama to his Sfarim, he writes the following. Besides the fact that he was, and this is what's written on his kever, and what we were zochet to visit his kever last week, it was actually on Wednesday, it was less than a week ago, and it's written in the kever that he was midabrana de umate. That means he was the spokesman of the nation. That's a title that's not given to many, and especially at his young age, as we're going to see that he passed away at 47 years old. He was called midabrana de umate, the spokesman of the nation. Muflag bidoro miyuchad hadaro. He was above everyone else, and they nicknamed him Harav Ada. Like there was a Tana there was an Amora in the Gemara called Rav Ada, so they called him Rav Ada, which is the Rashi Tevot Eliezer Diabila, and it's interesting. It says like this in the Eskama of the Chida. Kadavina Talia Ozen Shama Besedrem Gurotav. When I was a child, I already heard about his greatness. Hen hen Noraotav. He says when he was 17 years old, Ben Shva Isre Shana, Piresh Kol Mideh de Kashe Sheiknu Min Hashamayim Chochma Mifora B'Kli Kodesh Kli Chemda. He already wrote books. He wrote a Sfarim called Magen Giborim, which is Perushim on the Shas. Now in Shem HaGdolim, the Chida writes something very interesting. He says that he, because of his great mind and his genius, he would be writing, and sometimes the Chidushim would come out so fast, he would write them and then erase them because it was just coming so fast. He had to tone it down. So he would write it and erase it. So a lot of times the Ketavim, even they ran out of ink and he kept on writing. So it was very hard to decipher them. He writes, that's what the Chida writes in Shem HaGedolim, Ma'arechet Mem, by the Sfarim Magen Giborim, by Ma'arechet Sfarim, Ma'arechet Mem. That's where he writes that it was his writings were overflowing, and it seems to be a theme by many of the Haskamot about Rabbi Eliezer di Avila. It's written as well that in the Haskama of Rabbi Chaim Toledano, who seemed to me who was born in Meknes, but later moved to Rabat, and it seems to be that he learned by him. So he writes about Rabbi Eliezer di Avila, Ve'akol hayu na'asim lefanav kacharashim. Everybody, when they were in front of him, they were like mute. He would whatever questions they would have, he would answer them, and they would, up to a point that it wouldn't be like questions. I had this experience when I used to go to Shiurim by Rav Eliashiv when I was in Eretz Yisrael. People would ask him questions from all over, prepare questions, and the way he would answer them, they would look almost idiotic because it was like so simple. The answers that he gave were so simple according to the clarity of his vision on the sugya in front of him. The answers were just so simple, and this seems to be what was going on at the time, that he had talmidim around him. It's written in the Saskama that the talmidim were around him, bigdud, like legions. They were sitting around like troops around him, and when he would build towers of halacha, and he would start asking questions and answering, everybody would be quiet. They wouldn't be even able to answer to the great depths that he used to go to. So that is what Reb Chaim Toledano in Saleh writes. Also, his father, he had one daughter. He didn't have any sons, Rabbi Eliezer di Avila. This daughter married Rabbi Shlomo di Avila, who it seems to be was wealthy and used that wealth appropriately, that he worked his whole life to try to publish the writings of his illustrious father-in-law. And he went to Livorno and he got Askamot, and he worked very hard on printing. They keep on saying that he was already 15 years old, he started writing. I mean, the Chaydadik mentioned 17, they read when it's 15 years old. It's unfortunate that he didn't live a long life, but there is a story attributed to the passing of his life in the Sefer Malchei Rabbanan of Rabbi Yosef ben Naim, who wrote a biography on the Chachamim of Morocco. Who I was also zoche to see his kever on last Thursday, and he writes like this. He doesn't write it in regards to Rabbi Eliezer di Avila, but there was another Chacham in that time called Rav Khalifa ibn Malka, who was buried in Agadir. One of the great Chachamim of that time, one of the great Chachamim that Agadir had, and he wrote a sefer called Kaf Naki, which is commonly used. I quote it a lot. It was just recently printed, and he writes like this: that he heard a story that Rav Khalifa ibn Malka was once walking with his good friend Rabbi Eliezer di Avila, and they passed by the house. They passed by a goy who was known to be a sorcerer. He had many powers, and Rav Khalifa ben Malka wanted to see if he would tell them, with the inside information that he had, when the Mashiach was coming. So the goy told him. When he asked this to the goy started becoming had a lot of fear that came upon him, and he told him, "You asked me something that I cannot answer you, and if I would answer you, I would have to die, And it could be that I would die before even I would tell you. So then the guy told him, but you should know, this year, the Chacham that's next to you is going to die. In other words, Rabbi Eliezer di Avila. So he was very sad. Rabbi Eliezer di Avila was very, Rabbi Khalifa ben Malka was very sad, because it seems to be that he understood that there was truth in what was being said. So Rabbi Eliezer di Avila saw that his friend was very sad. He said, what did he tell you? So he didn't want to tell him, but at the end he convinced him to tell him, and he told him that he's going to pass away that year. So Rabbi Eliezer di Avila answered him, I'm not worried, because I know that at my age already, I reached my shlemut. I reached my completeness. I reached my my destined goal. So that was Rabbi Eliezer di Avila. Just to give you an idea, the Shelot Tshuvot of Rabbi Raphael and Kawa, one of them is called Karnei Re'im. And in Karnei Re'im, he writes the following. First of all, he was very involved with the learning of the Maharsha. If you could look through his books, see that the Maharsha was a cornerstone by him, up to a point that once he dreamed that he didn't understand the Kushya, the Maharsha came to him as an old man and explained to him, and then he went away. And in the Sfarim Karnei Re'im, Siman Resh Vav, so just he writes like this: Matzati le'Rav Mufla Mor Zikni Malach Rabbi Raphael Bibas. I found that Rabbi Raphael Bibas wrote the following. Rabbi Raphael Bibas, who also we visited his kever, he's buried in Saleh. Ayin Beshut le'Rav Hada. One should look into the Shelot Tshuvot Rav Hada, which is not printed nowadays. Shehe'ele, that he concludes de belohu chzak tzarich befanav davka, that if somebody is not, it doesn't have a chazaka, so he has to come in front of him for edut or whatever they're talking about over there. And because of that ruling that the Rav Hada says Rabbi Raphael Bibas, bevadai kavate de Rav Hada naktinan de Rav Chele v'Rav Guvle bechokmat hayun, and we for sure follow the rulings of Rabbi Eliezer di Avila because of his greatness and his strength and his wisdom in the depth of plumbing through the depth of Torah. That was the kavod that they gave to the writings of Eliezer di Avila. Unfortunately, in Halacha, we don't have his writings printed. We do have the Magen Giborim that is recently printed on Masechet Kiddushin. We have other, I think Masechet Bamitzia is also put out. We have Sefer Chesed Ve'emet of Drushim and the Sefer Milchemet Mitzvah he wrote. He wrote a couple of Sfarim, and unfortunately they're not as used as much. But once again, his greatness was something that was unparalleled, and he was niftar on Gimel Adar, which is coming up in a few weeks. He was actually in less than 2 weeks on Gimel Adar of Adar Aleph. So this year it's going to be Adar Aleph. We're going to have Shana Me'uber. It's going to be Adar Aleph. Gimel Adar was his Hilula, and this great Chacham's memory should remain by his Torah, should be learned and should be remembered. Chazaku Baruch.